I have spent most of my life around water. Rivers, bayous, lakes, and swamps. They've been my companions since I was old enough to grip a fishing rod. My father used to tell me that the swamp held secrets older than the cypress trees themselves. Secrets that lingered in the stagnant pools, in the heavy air that clung to the skin, in the half-light that filtered through curtains of moss. He always said it with a half-smile, though, as if it was part of the folklore every child in Louisiana was meant to grow up hearing. I never thought much of it, not until the night I lingered too long in the swamp and felt something waiting just beneath the surface. It was a late summer evening, the kind where the air presses down so hard you feel it in your lungs. The sun had already sunk below the tree line, but the heat hadn't loosened its grip. Mosquitoes swarmed in thick clouds, whining at my ears and finding every patch of exposed skin. The water smelled of rot and algae, the unmistakable odor of the swamp, dense, wet, and ancient. I had taken my small aluminum boat out farther than I usually did, chasing catfish that tended to surface near the deeper channels at dusk. The water there was darker, as though the mud itself swallowed any light that dared touch it. The swamp is never quiet, not truly. Frogs croaked in waves, cicadas shrieked in their endless chorus, and unseen creatures splashed now and then in the black water. But as I sat waiting for a bite, the sounds began to thin. First the frogs fell silent, then the insects. The air itself seemed to pause, hanging thick and heavy. I noticed the smell then, not just the swamp's usual odor, but something sharper, fouler, like meat left too long in the sun. It rose from the water, seeping into my boat, clinging to the back of my throat. I thought maybe a gar had died nearby, or that something larger, maybe even a deer, had drowned and was rotting beneath the surface. I tried to shake the thought away and focused on my line, but the stench grew stronger, and with it came the faintest ripple against my boat. A push, gentle at first, like the current shifting, then another, harder, as if something beneath me was brushing against the hull. The swamp is shallow in most places, and the thought of a gator swimming beneath didn't scare me. I've seen them all my life. What unsettled me was how the ripples moved, not away from the boat but circling it, deliberate, as though tracing its outline. The water lapped softly, rhythmic and patient. I leaned over, lantern in hand, its weak flame sputtering against the damp air. The surface reflected only darkness, broken here and there by strands of moss. For a long moment I saw nothing. Then the faint outline of pale fingers broke the surface. They slipped upward just enough for me to see, slick with mud, long and thin. They didn't thrash like an animal struggling for air. They reached, slow and sure, before sinking back beneath the water with barely a sound. The swamp seemed to hold its breath with me. I couldn't move. My knuckles whitened around the lantern, my body rooted to the seat, though every instinct screamed at me to start the motor and leave. The smell of rot filled my head so thick I thought I'd choke on it. Then came the knock, a dull thud against the underside of the boat, strong enough to rattle it. Once, then again, steady as a heartbeat. Whatever it wasn't drifting. It was there, directly beneath me, announcing itself. I tried to tell myself it was a log. The swamp is full of them, half-sunken cypress trunks waiting to snag a propeller or scrape the bottom of a hull. But the knocking was too measured, too alive. I set the lantern down, my hands trembling, and reached for the rope attached to the anchor. I thought maybe if I pulled it up, I could drift free, maybe make less noise than if I cranked the engine. The rope was slick with swamp water as I hauled it hand over hand. Halfway up, it snagged. I pulled harder, feeling resistance, not the weight of mud or weeds, but something tugging back. The rope vibrated, pulling against my grip like something below had wrapped around it. And then, with a sudden slackening, it came free, sending me stumbling backward in the boat. When I looked down again, the water rippled outward in wide circles, as though something had just slipped deeper. I should have left then. Every part of me knew it. But I was paralyzed by the unnatural quiet. Even the mosquitoes seemed to have vanished. The swamp had become a hollow space, soundless, timeless, waiting for whatever shared it with me to make its move. That's when I saw the face. It broke the surface only halfway, tilted so the waterline cut across the mouth. Skin so pale it seemed luminous against the black water. Eyes wide and clouded, fixed on me with a hunger I can't explain. The features were human, but stretched somehow, too long, as though molded by the swamp itself. A thin film of moss clung to its hair, dripping in strands down its face. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My lantern's flame quivered, painting the water in trembling strokes of light. The pale figure watched me without blinking, without moving, its expression both empty and intent. Then, as slowly as it had risen, it slipped back beneath, leaving the surface as smooth as glass. The stench intensified, pouring into my lungs until I gagged. My boat rocked once more, harder this time, as though shoved from below. I grabbed the motor cord, yanking with a desperation that burned my arm. The engine sputtered once, twice, before roaring to life, shattering the swamp's silence. I didn't look back as I sped toward the shallows, branches clawing at my face, water spraying high as the boat cut through it. The engine growled, drowning out everything else, yet even above the noise, I thought I heard the steady rhythm of knocking beneath me. By the time I reached the dock, the smell had faded, the swamp's chorus returned as though nothing had happened. Frogs sang, insects buzzed, and the air felt alive again. But the memory of those pale fingers, that face half hidden in the black water, has stayed with me. People tell me the swamp is just swamp, that it's mud and water and gators and nothing more. But I know what I saw. I know what waits beneath. And sometimes, when the night is hot and still, I swear I can smell that rotting stench drifting in from the bayou, like a warning that it hasn't forgotten me. Lantern in the Pines, a camper's fright in Pennsylvania. The forest in Pennsylvania has always held a strange kind of beauty for me. Tall pines rising like cathedral pillars, their crowns knitting together to form a ceiling that filters the sun into pale shafts of light. The air always feels sharper there, touched with resin and damp earth. I had camped in those woods before, often with friends, but this time I went alone. I thought solitude would sharpen the edges of the experience, let me breathe more deeply, and escape the noise of everyday life. I never considered that solitude could carry its own dangers, the kind you can't explain, the kind you can't escape. I set up my small tent in a clearing I had found not far from a shallow creek. The ground was soft with needles, their scent rising warm under the weight of the sun. My fire crackled low as twilight came, throwing sparks into the dusk, the smoke mixing with the sticky sweetness of pine sap. The forest around me hummed with insects, the steady stridulation of crickets weaving through the deeper croaks of hidden frogs. By the time darkness settled fully, my campfire was the only light for what felt like miles. The stars pricked the sky, but the canopy swallowed most of them, leaving the forest floor wrapped in shadows. The air cooled quickly, and I pulled my jacket close as I fed the fire. That's when I saw the lantern. It flickered deep among the trees, a faint glow at first, amber against the black trunks. I thought maybe another camper was passing through, someone else who had chosen this patch of woods to spend the night. The light swayed, rising and falling like it was carried by a hand. I waited, expecting it to draw nearer, for voices or footsteps to follow. None came. Instead, the lantern hovered between the pines, too far to see clearly, too close to ignore. It didn't move like someone walking. It drifted, slow and aimless, stopping in intervals before gliding again. I stood by my fire, the smoke curling into my eyes, and tried to convince myself it was nothing unusual. But the forest had fallen strangely silent. The insects had cut off mid-song, the frogs no longer croaked. It was as though the entire woods was holding its breath. I told myself not to go after it, but my body betrayed me. Lantern in hand, I stepped into the trees, the fire shrinking behind me with each pace. The needles muffled my steps, and the cold damp of the forest floor seeped into my boots. The other lantern's glow pulled me farther, always just beyond reach. The deeper I went, the thicker the air became. A damp, moldy smell clung to everything, as though the forest itself was rotting from within. My own lantern guttered, its light paling against the other glow that moved with eerie precision. No matter how far I walked, the distance between us remained the same, always visible, never close enough. Minutes stretched strangely in the dark. My breath felt too loud, my heartbeat too heavy. When I finally stopped, the glow stopped with me. It hung among the pines, motionless, waiting. I lifted my lantern higher, the flame stretching shadows long and crooked. For a moment I thought I saw a figure, a suggestion of shoulders, of a head, standing behind the glow. But when I blinked, it was gone, leaving only the swaying light. A sound came then, not from the lantern, but from all around. Pine needles shifting, faint crunches like footsteps circling, never landing in one direction. My skin crawled with the sense of being watched. I turned, but every path looked the same, tree after tree in endless ranks, their trunks silver gray in my flickering light. I tried to retrace my steps, but the forest had rearranged itself. The creek should have been nearby, the clearing just beyond, yet all I saw was darkness and those same reaching branches. And then the glow began to move again, this time closer. My chest tightened as it drifted between the trunks, slow but deliberate, never hurrying, never faltering. I backed away, my own lantern shaking in my hand. The fire's smoke was long gone, no scent of camp to guide me back. The silence pressed closer, broken only by the faint rustle of pine boughs swaying without wind. The glow was no longer steady. It pulsed as though breathing. The stench hit me then, not the sweet sharpness of pine, but a rancid odor like damp cloth left to rot, mixed with something metallic like rust or blood. My stomach turned, bow rising in my throat as I stumbled backward. The glow flared, bright enough to wash the trees in amber for a heartbeat. In that brief burst, I saw it clearly. It wasn't a lantern. The light hung in the hollow of a skull, its jaw unhinged, sockets empty but filled with the glow of something alive and wrong. A shape hunched behind it, pale skin stretched too thin over crooked bones, arms dangling long enough to scrape the earth. Its head tilted unnaturally, as though the neck had broken long ago. The light within it pulsed once more, like the beat of a heart, casting shadows that bent the forest into monstrous shapes. My own lantern sputtered, its flame nearly dying. I clutched it like a lifeline, but the darkness surged closer, swallowing the glow from my shaking hand. The thing in the pines took a step, slow, deliberate, a creak of bone loud as splitting wood. The forest echoed it, magnifying it until it filled every direction. I ran then. The trees clawed at my arms, branches snapping against my face, needles crunching underfoot as I fled. The glow followed, not running, not chasing in the way an animal would, but gliding with the certainty of something that knew I couldn't escape. My lungs burned, my legs quaked, but the forest never broke, never gave way to the clearing I'd left behind. At some point, I tripped. My lantern flew from my hand, crashing against the ground, the flame extinguished in an instant. Darkness collapsed around me, absolute and smothering. Only one light remained, the one pulsing through the trees, closer now, so close I could hear the faint rasp of breath that wasn't mine. I don't remember how I made it back. I woke at dawn, sprawled at the edge of the clearing, my tent still standing, my fire nothing but gray ash. The forest had returned to its song, crickets chirping, birds calling, as though the night had been a dream. But my lantern lay shattered at my side, its glass smeared with something dark and sticky, smelling faintly of rot. I've never camped alone since, and when I drive past the endless walls of pine along Pennsylvania's back roads, I sometimes catch myself scanning the shadows for a flicker of light. Always afraid I'll see that glow again. Always afraid it's still looking for me. The Silent Stalker, shadows moving in the Black Hills. The Black Hills of South Dakota have always carried an aura that feels older than the rocks themselves. There's a weight to the air, a stillness that doesn't belong to any ordinary forest. It's the kind of place where silence has a shape, pressing in against your skin, making every breath feel too loud, every step a disturbance. I had heard about the legends, whispers of spirits and shadows that don't belong to the living, but I'd never given them much thought. At least, not until the night I found myself alone in the dense heart of those hills, where the trees close in so tightly they blot out the sky, and the darkness doesn't just surround you, it follows. I had gone out late, against better judgment, chasing the idea of photographing the stars in a place unspoiled by city lights. My camera bag was slung over my shoulder, and a small lantern dangled from my hand. The trail was uneven, the earth littered with pine needles and broken twigs that cracked underfoot. The scent of resin clung to the air, mixed with the faint musk of damp soil. At first, it was almost peaceful, the kind of quiet that feels sacred. But peace has a way of turning into unease when it lasts too long. The first thing I noticed was the absence of sound. No crickets, no owls, not even the distant rustle of small animals in the underbrush. The forest had gone mute. My lantern's flame cast a trembling circle of light around me, and beyond it was nothing but black. I lifted my eyes to the canopy, expecting to see the stars I had come for, but the pines knitted so tightly overhead that not a single pinprick of light could break through. I tried to ignore the tension crawling up my spine and kept walking. My boots sank softly into the loam, each step feeling heavier than the last. After a while, I realized I wasn't sure how far I'd gone. The trail was no longer clear. The ground seemed to shift subtly, pulling me deeper, though I couldn't remember choosing to leave the path. That's when I felt it, the sensation of being watched. Not the vague awareness that comes with solitude, but the piercing focus of eyes tracking every movement. I froze, the lantern swaying slightly in my grip. The shadows beyond its reach seemed to ripple, as though something had shifted just out of sight. I held my breath, straining to hear. At first, there was nothing. Then came the faint crunch of pine needles behind me. I turned sharply, raising the lantern. The circle of light revealed only more trees, their trunks gray and endless, stretching away into the dark. No movement, no figure. But the sound had been clear. A step, deliberate. I told myself it was an animal, maybe a deer or a fox. But the silence didn't fit. No forest creature moves without stirring other sounds. This was different, measured, careful, matching my rhythm. I started forward again, faster now, my breath shallow, my grip tight around the lantern's handle. The shadows thickened, pressing against the edge of the light, curling into shapes that seemed almost human before unraveling when I looked directly at them. The crunching followed, always a pace behind, never rushing, never falling back. I stopped abruptly. The sound stopped too. My skin prickled with the certainty that whatever it wasn't hiding. It wanted me to know it was there. The air grew colder, carrying a faint smell like damp stone mixed with something sour, like metal left to rust. I shifted the lantern higher, its light flickering against the rough bark of the pines. For a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing between two trunks, a mass darker than the dark around it. But when I blinked, it was gone, leaving only emptiness. I pressed on, though every step felt like sinking deeper into a trap. The forest seemed endless, looping on itself. My footprints were the only marks on the ground, yet I felt as if I had walked this stretch before, again and again. Each tree looked the same, each shadow cut at the same angle, until it felt like I was circling something unseen. The stalker never hurried. It never revealed itself. It stayed in the edge of vision, in the bend of shadows, in the silence that grew heavier with every heartbeat. Sometimes I thought I heard breathing, low, steady, close enough to stir the hair at the back of my neck. Sometimes it was the scrape of something against bark, high up, as though whatever followed me could climb as easily as it walked. At one point, the lantern guttered, nearly going out. In that instant of weak flame, I caught a clearer glimpse. Something long and thin slipped between the trees, faster than a blink, its outline crooked, limbs too angular for anything human. My chest locked with terror, and I shook the lantern until the flame steadied again. The light felt like the only thing keeping me tethered to safety, a fragile barrier against the shadows pressing in. Time unraveled. I don't know how long I wandered, but exhaustion pulled at my legs and panic gnawed at my thoughts. I tried to find landmarks, anything familiar, but the forest refused to give me orientation. It was as if the black hills had swallowed me whole. Then the lantern's fuel began to dwindle. The flame shrank, and with it, the shadows grew bolder, swelling inward. The crunch of footsteps came closer, unashamed now, deliberate in their pursuit. I didn't run, I couldn't. My body had passed the point of fleeing. All I could do was stumble forward, clutching the dying lantern, knowing that when its light finally went out, I would no longer be alone in the dark. The last thing I remember is collapsing against the roots of a massive pine, the lantern sputtering in my hand. As the flame gave its final flicker, I saw them, two shapes, not one, standing at the edge of the light. Too tall, too thin, their heads tilting in unison, waiting for the darkness to finish its work. I woke at dawn on the trail, my lantern cracked and cold beside me. The forest was alive again with birdsong, the air warming as if nothing had happened. But the memory of those footsteps, of the shadows that moved with purpose, has never left me. Even now, when I walk through the woods alone, I can't help but listen for the crunch of pine needles just behind me, steady, patient, waiting for me to stop.